Hello and welcome to this webinar. I'm very happy to have you guys here. It's going to be an exciting session. We're going to go about half an hour, 40 minutes with material, and then I'm going to leave some space for questions. So, and also we're going to make this very interactive throughout the session. So take notes, and then either I can address some of your questions during the session or leave it to the end for the Q&A. And let's get started. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about becoming a global leader. And so if you are in any role that is already connecting with other people with different cultures, or if you want to go to the next level, this will be an amazing session for you. And let's see. So to make sure that we are at the right place, you are at the right place, and this is for you. If you want to develop your leadership skills, and if you're already a leader, either in title or even without, you don't need a title to necessarily be in a position to take the lead. And this can really be good in terms of getting ahead to get to a position where you might have more leadership responsibilities. And also, if you're already working with the diverse people in your teams, customers, or especially with distributed remote teams, or even here in San Francisco, we have very diverse teams. So sometimes in one office, we have maybe 7 people and 5 of them were born in different countries. So in all these situations, if you're going to be successful, this is the right place for you. And because diversity is impacting so many other aspects of our work, even our neighbors, the vendors we deal with, here you're going to get the skills to be successful both on the personal side and on the professional side. Now, I want to make sure that you stay until the end. I have a special surprise for you. I'm sure you're going to like it a lot. So stay tuned. And then at the very end, I'll go more in details about that. So what's the agenda for today? First, we're going to look at how the world is today. Where do we stand? What are the challenges? And then I'm going to talk about cultural intelligence and why it's relevant. And then I'll give you 3 ways to develop your cultural intelligence starting today. Then I'll cover a few case studies to really see how this comes into play in a work environment. So you can maybe apply it, maybe recognize a situation that you've had that is similar and know how to apply it. And then we'll do some Q&A. Some of you sent in your questions. Thank you for that. Mira, I got your question. And so I'll start with that, and then you can also share your questions in the chat box, which is on your right. So keep that in mind. So as the session goes, take notes so that then at the end, we can all cover that. And then I have some closing remarks, and I'll share the special surprise that I prepared for you. So before we dive in, a little bit more about myself. So as you can maybe tell from the accent, I'm Hungarian. The accent has a little bit of a French component to it, which always confuses people. And I'll explain why that is. So born in Hungary, I moved to Algeria with my parents when I was young. And I started school in French there. So I've been speaking French since age 4. I'm very happy I learned that language young because it's not an easy one. And then after that, coming back to Hungary for a few years, I moved to Canada. Now in Canada, I did high school and university, and in university is where I discovered AIESEC and where we did work exchange for students, and I was responsible first of incoming, so helping students who are coming to work, first work and cultural experience in Montreal, welcome them and help them, have a great time in Montreal. And then I helped also with going abroad. And I went to Egypt to this conference, Afro Expo, which was about 80 youth leaders from around Africa and some other parts of the world for, I think, a week. And then I stayed a little bit longer. That was a moment where really my passion for learning about other cultures was reignited. And also just I saw what was possible with good leadership. So it was very inspiring. After university, I worked in some startups, being an entrepreneur, and I moved to the US. So now I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which I love. And I built a number of startups. In all of them, it was a very diverse teams. It was always distributed, multicultural. I'm Hungarian. My co-founder was Moroccan. Always very diverse. And for me, I noticed dealing with these other cultures was always easy. It came naturally, but it wasn't always the case around me. And as the last 15 years, the workplace became more diverse, I saw that these things that come are challenges for others are easy to me, and people start asking me for advice. And so I decided to change direction professionally, sell my shares in my company, and focus on coaching and training when it comes to cross-cultural work, leadership development. So what I'm doing now is I dramatically improve the life and business of people who work across cultures. So expats, people who lead diverse companies, going on business trips, whatever the case is, if other cultures are involved, then I can help. So it's been a really fun ride. So enough about me, let's dive right in. So where does the world stand today? I think that it's an exciting time to be alive. Technology has helped, communication, travel, and personally, I love travel. I don't know if you remember these. So for some of you, it's if you do remember, please let me know in the chat. So these were the plane tickets. So if you are much younger and you have this really nice online boarding passes, then it's cool. But so these were like almost like in a checkbook. So you have several of these sheets, and I was always so afraid of losing this, and I thought like if I lose it, that's it. And so this is how you traveled. There was no online boarding passes. The check-in process was difficult. You really had to get there hours earlier. Now it's much easier. Another technological aspect that I really enjoy is communication. So FaceTime, one of my favorites. It's also a favorite of my mom. Since she discovered FaceTime, that's the only method she uses to communicate with me. So it's always a FaceTime call. I might be buying groceries, FaceTime. So I have to tell my mom, like, everybody can hear us now. But it's great because it's almost as if I can be there. And for work, it's amazing too, because you can build those bonds and relationships with your team members almost as if you were there. And the almost is key here, using video chat. Not everybody uses it for remote teams, but they should. But it's a very good tool. Now, what technology has not addressed yet properly are the cultural differences. So you can be working with people from many countries. Sometimes it's obvious there's some differences, but sometimes if you meet somebody after a long trip, you're on the other side of the world and they speak your language fairly well, then you might be forgetting the differences and thinking, they speak English, or in my case, Hungarian or French. And then, it's okay, we are the same. So subconsciously, sometimes this is how we react. But actually, we need to be ever vigilant, because culture and language, so there's a culture behind the language. So two English-speaking countries might not have the same culture. And we'll go more into detail that in a moment. So yeah, Mira remembers those old school plane tickets. Now, coming back to culture, the reason why it's difficult to manage these differences is because it's very complex and nuanced and ever-changing. You have so many different variations of subcultures and cultures, and even observing is difficult. So when it comes to culture, it's like an iceberg. So what's on the surface is what you can see directly. How you're dressed, your accent, how you look. If I'm different than you, skin color, race, or whatnot, or even the style, then it gives a signal, like something different. But there can be situations where either somebody else, like this guy I met in Kőszeg, which is a small town in Hungary, he's a friend of my cousin. And we look so similar that people might thought we are related. But our culture, based on our experiences, is very different. He's always lived in that town, and he's a plumber, and he's only visited Austria, which is a few kilometers or miles away. In my case, I've lived in 3-4 countries. So you see, on the surface, we might be the same or very similar, but what's under the surface is very different. And also, when you ask somebody even to explain their culture, most of them have trouble, because their culture is what they've always done. They cannot really tell you like, in my culture, this is how we communicate, this is how we lead. And it's because fish can see water. Because if you're in that culture swimming, then you lose perspective. Now, with diversity, there's some challenges. There's always two sides of the coin. On the negative side, if you look at statistics, 70% of international ventures fail. So that could be, for example, when Walmart went to Germany. So they tried to expand, and I thought, let's use the American approach, and that failed. There were many aspects, and they tried for like 7 years. Some of the cultural differences were in the US, you have these greeters, people who come, welcome you, they ask you how you're doing, and try to help you. In Germany, asking somebody who you don't know, who doesn't know you, how you are, is very weird. It's like, that's not your business. And shoppers prefer to be left alone. So that was one of many aspects of culture that just did not get right. And after 7 years, they left the country and wrote off $1 billion in loss. Now, later on, they came back. They started partnering with a local partner who had the know-how, the cultural insight, and some of the market understanding. And the second time, they were much more successful. When it comes to international assignments, it is also quite difficult. 50% of them finish early. And often and in both cases, actually, the international ventures, and when it comes to expat assignments, it is the cultural differences in 99% of the cases that are the cause of the issue. And with expats, what happens is the person moves there, they might have a job, but then how they have to work and relate, manage people, communicate, it becomes very frustrating very quickly. And also their families, they often don't get any support. So the spouse moves there, takes care of the kids, no friends, no network, and these cultural barriers that would keep them from really being able to have friendships very easily. And so all this comes down to a lot of frustration and miscommunication in teams or in these workplaces. So when it comes to expat assignments ending early, obviously career damage and also a lot of money that is lost. Now, on the other side, diversity can have very good advantages. If you work well with diversity, you have better judgment, better creativity, more innovation, better innovation, fast execution, and increased profit. It almost sounds like it's the opposite. Miscommunication, wasting time here, you're operating more effectively, and it's possible. And if you look at statistics, McKinsey & Co. says that ethnically diverse companies are 35% more likely to outperform their peers. Catalyst Research says that organizations with women on their board are outperform their peers. And Deloitte Australia says that inclusive teams outperform their peers by 80% in team-based assessment. So in the end, diverse teams that are led the right way, and I'll show you how, outperform homogeneous teams. So there's a lot of advantage here. So how do you go from turning diversity and cultural diversity from a liability, from a liability to an asset? So as leaders, we always had to be able to manage and lead diverse set of people. But now with the world becoming more diverse, it's even a wider range of differences. So and there's a new skill that we need to develop. And what is the skill? So since the 90s, emotional intelligence has been very important, and people realize how important it was to effective leadership or any kind of relationships. Now, who are familiar with emotional intelligence here? So if you are, let me know in the chat box. Okay. Good number of you. That's good. I mean, here in the Bay Area, it is very common. Every leadership book talks about emotional intelligence. Yes, Chris. Yeah, I think everybody's familiar with it. Not everybody might know the exact definition, but it's basically the good interpersonal skills. Now, cultural intelligence, which I'm going to cover in a moment, or CQ, is really becoming the new EQ. So when you have a team, let's say from the same culture, then emotional intelligence is very helpful when it comes to managing conflict and relationships. But what if they're from different cultures? So then you might have certain action from one person that may be perceived as rude or whatnot. But if you are trying to understand from one context, then it can lead to just more confusion. So CQ is really where EQ drops off. And in this globalized and borderless world, CQ is becoming even more important than EQ. So it's really, really like a superpower. So cultural intelligence, which is really this ability that we need to develop, is basically the ability to relate and work effectively across cultures. So be able to build a relationship, a genuine relationship with anyone. Doesn't matter if you know them from before or whatnot, and then be able to work together. But effectively is the key word here. And it's not something that's automatic. So some people brag they've traveled to 40 countries and lived in many. But if they're closed-minded, it doesn't help, because then you have missed out on all the opportunities to learn. It's not based on where you live and where you work, but anybody can become more culturally intelligent. Sorry. So that's the good news. Now, how does this look like in practice? Now, if your CQ is low, then you might find a lot of frustration and confusion when it comes to new cultures or just people who think differently. You might not have to go very far to have somebody from a different enough culture, rural versus city, just so different professions have different cultures. These are also the people that might come across as ignorant and self-centered, because then they're not aware of the impact of maybe what they're saying. And this also caused big disasters when it comes to PR. Like here in the US, you had some advertisement where they tried to be funny, which was funny in their context, but it was insensitive or outright racist for other groups. So this, if the person had a little bit more CQ, they would have realized that, let me verify if somebody who is from a different group than me, how they perceive this. Now, on the other side, you have people with high cultural intelligence. Now, how does that look like? Better judgment, better creativity, better innovation, better job opportunities, and also the raises. And that's partially because you develop a global network from different groups where you are, but also internationally. So more opportunities, better job opportunities, and then you can get better compensations. And in the end, it's somebody who understands the differences and similarities between cultures. And when they see something different, they look at it as an opportunity to learn, not something to fear. It doesn't mean that they're always, flawless. People with high CQ also make mistakes, but they learn from them, and then over time they make fewer mistakes, and they develop like a repertoire of behaviors that help them to be more and more effective and have more and more pleasure as they go through life and encounter new situations. Now, some of the academics here, David Livermore, who is one of the leading academics in this area of research, says that CQ is the #1 success or predictor of success in today's borderless world. So what does that mean? It means that things are changing, and it's the people who adapt who are able to succeed and get ahead. So if you can pick up these skills now, then it can be very helpful for later on, where it will be necessary to have these skills to lead effectively. And the reason why this is relevant is because how the communication style, leadership preferences, all those different elements impact our leadership and how effective we are. So let's see how we can develop this. So the first of three steps I'm going to share with you is understanding yourself. And the reason why this is important is to start with ourselves when we want to learn others, learn about others or work with others, is because our culture and our experiences impact our perception. So if we see a situation where, let's say, so if somebody looks at you a certain way or like has intense gaze. Now, in some cultures, it's considered rude, while in other cultures, it's considered respectful. So you see, a certain event, depending on how you look at it, can be seen both ways. So if you understand who you are and where your culture stands, then you can understand, what is the intent? Is it really the way I think it is? And also be aware of how you might be perceived by others. So it just has this extra layer of self-awareness. Now, but what is culture anyway? Culture, when it comes to the simplest definition, is what is desirable and what is acceptable. So, for example, when I was growing up as a boy, it was not a good thing to cry. Boys shouldn't cry. So that's not desirable or acceptable. But for girls, it was okay. So you see, that was one difference. Now, when it comes to other situations, let's say at work, as a leader here in the US, a good leader is somebody who is charismatic, has a self-deprecating humor, very friendly, approachable. But this type of leader, if they go to, let's say, Morocco, they will not have a good time. That self-deprecating humor will backfire, because in that area, that culture, a leader is supposed to be strong, very decisive, not asking for opinion so much. Now, this changes from generation to generation as well, but you see, as soon as you change context, then what's acceptable or desirable changes. So as leaders, we need to be aware of this. Many of the leaders who fail are leaders who are successful, let's say, in one country, and then after a while, they become good. They learn, they lead from the gut, as they say. But when they change context, let's say an American going to Dubai, an Hungarian going to South America, if you don't adapt the leadership, this is when problems happen. So always, when you change context, be vigilant and look around to see, do I need to change something or not? Now, as far as cultural identity, we need to be aware of our identity. So there is culture when it comes to with your gender, the generation, millennials and baby boomers, all this friction between generations. It's a cultural difference. And a culture develops as soon as enough people do the things a certain way. And it's also impacted by the environment, by history. So millennials, it is the 2008 financial crisis had a strong impact on their culture. So knowing all the different cultures we are in helps us be self-aware, but also better understand the other people around us. Now, misunderstandings happen when in one of these cultural aspects, there's a big difference. So maybe the approach to communication, somebody's direct, somebody's indirect. If there's enough difference, that's when things start becoming difficult, and being aware helps really to catch these moments. And I'll share more about how to do that. So I'll give you an example. There was Johannes and Pablo. Johannes is a German engineer. He lives in Berlin, and Pablo just moved to Berlin, and he's going to work at his company. Now, for the onboarding, Johannes was going to meet Pablo at 1:30 in the afternoon, and then Pablo showed up, I think it was 17 minutes late, and Johannes remembered the exact time. He was very frustrated. But also, when Pablo showed up, he was very happy to meet finally Johannes. It's been a long time. But when he met Johannes, he was wondering, why is this person so cold? And on the other side, Johannes was wondering, well, this person seems to be happy, but this behavior, there's something weird. So this was a moment of friction. I'd like to ask you, what do you think happened? So whatever your first guess is, type it in the chat box, and let's see which way your intuition goes. Okay, so we have timeliness, time orientation. Yeah, you're getting warm. That's good. Anybody else? Any other guesses? Cultural difference, yeah. I mean, that comes down to time. So what happened is time orientation. So you see, there can be more than one way of looking at how punctual you need to be or how not punctual. Now, in this case, on the German side, when it comes to timeliness, if somebody is late, it is considered to be disrespectful. It's very important to be really precisely on time. And if you're late, you message them, but even then, just a few minutes is acceptable. You see, it comes back to the culture of what is acceptable and desirable. Now, on the Colombian side, time perception is flexible. Being a little bit late, it's okay. It's just how things are. This is how things are done. And so what happened in this case is So Johannes was being very frustrated and felt insulted. It's like, this person is coming to meet me. I'm going to spend time onboarding them, and I'm a manager here. How disrespectful. But when Pablo showed up, he was so happy to see him and so enthusiastic. Then Johannes started thinking, maybe there's something that I don't understand, because he's disrespecting me, but at the same time, he's being so friendly. Like, what's going on? And so these are the right approaches of like figuring out, oh, something unusual, let's figure it out. And in the next step, I'm going to show you how to do this. So time perception is one aspect of culture. Another one is communication. So one extreme is direct, and then you also have indirect. So tell me, I'd like to know, so out of you guys, which ones are, what do you prefer? Direct communication or indirect? So type it in the chat. I'd like to get a sense of which one you're from, and also what country you're from, so then that can give us a sense. So type it in while I continue, and then I'll see what the answers are. So direct communication is, as the name, as you can guess, is saying straight with the most concise way what you're trying to say. So it could be saying, I want Chinese food. For example, if you have a meeting trying to figure out how you're going to eat. On the other side, indirect is finding like a longer route to get there. So instead of saying, I want Chinese food, I might say, let's say somebody else suggests Italian food. I might say, could we maybe try something else? You see, so it's kind of like a softer approach. And this is really a spectrum. So you have the extreme, maybe the Germans, the Dutch, who are very direct. And you have the extreme, which is the East Asian countries, where communicating indirectly, meaning it means they have a saying for this, saying somebody who can read the air. And so what happens is people have messages between the lines, but how you read them depends on the culture. So even two indirect communicators, let's say Japanese and Brazilians, would have difficulty because they would look for the different meaning and misunderstand things. And also when these two sides communicate together, the indirect communicators find the direct communicators very rude, and the direct communicators find the indirect communicators like wishy-washy, untrustworthy. So you see, this is one example where the bigger the gap, the more opportunities for friction. So in terms of communication, we have Matt, USA, direct. Andre, I think Andre, you're from Romania, that's also direct. We have, let's see, Raul, Mexico, indirect. We have Philip from China, indirect. Yeah, so China, Japan. When it comes to communication style, it's not quite at the same point, but it is similar. Now, communication is tricky because you have general communication of general information, asking questions, but giving feedback is a separate sub area, and not everybody realizes this. This is very confusing when the French people come here to the US and work together, because so the US, as Matt pointed out, is a direct communicator, but when it comes to feedback, it is indirect. So what usually happens is you first give the praise directly, and then indirectly say what's wrong or what could be improved. Now, when French people come here, they expect the Americans to be direct communicators across the board. So when they come and they get feedback and the person starts with the positive, they think, oh, I'm doing a perfect job. I don't have to change anything, which is often not the case. And the reason the French misunderstand is because in the French culture, feedback is about directly bringing to the surface the issues and let's talk about them, solve them. So for a French person, why would you talk about the positive when there's some negative things to resolve? So they always start with the negative or only talk about negative, which some Americans feel like, why are you always so negative? So you see, this can cause misunderstandings. Several cases I know here of expats coming to the US here to San Francisco and getting in trouble at work because they get this feedback from the quarterly review or whatnot, and they never listen, never get the feedback. And the third time, their boss is frustrated. Like, I keep telling this person, what's wrong, and the person is just so happy and it doesn't change anything. So you see, this can be tricky. Now, in some cultures, communication is direct across the board, or indirect, but in some cases it is different. So again, we need to be vigilant. So as I said, direct, just say what's wrong, and then you have indirect, where you either say it indirectly, like this could be better, or simply, or this can be even various ranges of indirect. But the point is to kind of protect the feelings of the person. So there's some other dimensions that are important. So first, communication and feedback, the two most fundamental ones, because as leaders, we communicate. It's humans to humans. It doesn't matter what the technology is in between, it is still humans to humans, motivating, leading, and inspiring. Now, other aspects of culture are, so how you lead, egalitarian versus hierarchical. So in the US, it's more egalitarian. You don't have such, your boss is accessible. You can talk to them. People that talk on first name basis. In hierarchical, the hierarchy is very clear. It's, one step at a time. Never talk to the boss of the boss. In France, it's more like that. Now, deciding, is it consensual or top-down? Is it the boss who decides and it's executed, or do we talk about it, find some kind of consensus where everybody is happy? Trust, how trust is built. Do you build it based on the relationship first? Like, I know this person, I like them, therefore I trust them. Or do I work with this person, figure out that they're competent, and then I trust them? So one extreme is, for example, in Germany, it's more about task first. Competent, then I trust. In the Middle East, to do business or anything, it's about the relationship first. Doesn't matter who you are, whatnot. If I don't like you, then, we might not do business together. Also, you have disagreeing, which is, again, seeking confrontation or not. In France, for Americans, France might seem like very confrontational, but that's because in their culture, to have a good debate is healthy. That's why we exchange ideas, we come to better solutions, and they're pretty direct. While on the other side, you have avoiding confrontation. US is kind of in the middle. So in some cases, it's okay. Some cases, it's not. Scheduling, is it linear or time is flexible? So one aspect is punctuality, but also when it comes to tasks, is it one step after the other in a straight line, like in the US? Or let's say in France, it's kind of all over the place. In the end, they get things done, but it is not, they might change topics during a meeting, and it might be a bit confusing for outsiders what was agreed upon. But in the end, they make it work because this is their culture and they're familiar with how it works. Then finally, you have persuading, which is how you persuade. Is it application first? Meaning, if you put this piece in the machine, it's going to work. Or a principle, which is understanding what is the theory behind it. So in the US, it's more application. While in France, and even the whole education system is about understanding the theory behind first. So because their culture is in such a way, when somebody try to explain to them, like, just do it, a certain way, they're not comfortable. They need to understand what's the theory behind. So these are some of the aspects. There's some other aspects of culture where there are differences. One also that I like to point out is personal space. In some cultures, people like to keep a good personal space between people, while in others, the more physical contact when meeting and talking. For example, there was this time where a Mexican consulate or ambassador went to Norway, and the whole evening they were doing like this dance where, for the Mexican person, he wanted to come closer to the person, while the Norwegian wanted to keep the distance. So they were like, that's the ground, the venue. And you see, if you're not aware of this, you might again judge the person harshly. Like, oh, this person is so weird or so cold or aloof. Well, simply, it is one aspect of the culture where you are at different points. Now that you have a good understanding, a good overview of all the different aspects of culture, these are like levers where you have spectrums, where you can be on one extreme or the other. Being aware of who you are is useful. And then as you get to know the cultures, you're going to know where you're similar and where not. Now, another aspect of knowing yourself, which is very important, is bias. Now, bias is a prejudice or in favor or against a person or a group that is usually sometimes fair, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but it's usually unfair. So one example I can give you is, for example, some people think that certain countries, people from certain countries are better in math. Now, if you love math and you want a job in math, this can help you, but it's still unfair. And what if you come from the country that is stereotypically people think are good at math, but you don't want to work in math. You want to be a dancer, an artist, or something else, then it can hinder you unfairly. On the other side, you have people who might dress in a certain way. People might perceive them as being suspicious or dangerous, like a hoodie. That's one example. And in some cases, this can get you killed. If the wrong person has this bias, makes the wrong judgment. So both sides of the coin are very important to watch out. Among the biases, you also have unconscious bias, where it's basically these are beliefs that are held in the below the conscious mind, so outside of the conscious mind. So what happens is you might be a strong proponent of diversity, like in this example. There was Chris, who was a hiring manager at a tech company here in the Bay Area. So he was a very strong believer in diversity, and he would, attend conferences, even write about it. But when he would hire people, subconsciously he judged women to be less competent engineers. So in the end, he would not hire people that he should have hired otherwise. And then he was wondering why there isn't so much enough diversity in his team. And he would think maybe it's some other reasons, maybe the talent pool, but really it was inside of him. It was his unconscious bias. Now the way you can manage these biases is not to try to eliminate them, because that's very hard. It's about becoming aware of them. And once you become aware, you can control them. Another thing you can do is go to the project Implicit, which is a really cool site when it comes to tests that can help you become aware of your biases. Now that you get the foundation, get to know yourself, let's look at the next step, which is suspend judgment and be curious. Now, when something unusual happens, just like when Johannes and Pablo, so Johannes is, something tells him this is not what it seems to be. This person acts as if he is disrespecting me, but when he meets me, he seems to be very happy to see me. That's when it's important to be curious and ask yourself, why is this happening? Now, to be able to stop in that moment of frustration, what you can do is develop your mindfulness. Do mindful meditation is great, and it's very simple. It can be part of a routine. So I wrote a blog post about the 5 routines that a leader can develop. This in the blog, you can check it out, and this is one of them. Like in my morning, I come sit here, I have this nice big windows here, set a timer for 10-15 minutes, and I just close my eyes and focus on my breathing. If my thoughts move away, I bring them back. And doing this every day really helps me be more aware. So as soon as something starts bothering me, before I get really upset, I can catch myself and ask myself, okay, what's really going on? And the reason you want to do this is you want to avoid automatic reactions. The automatic reactions are usually bad, usually overreacted, and then they follow the rules that you are used to from your home context. So if it's another culture, then most likely it's going to be a bad reaction. So these reactions, the bigger the gap is, when it's the most likely you're going to have an issue. So here we are comparing France and the US. As you can see, in some aspects, it's very similar. So when it comes to deciding, the US and France are very close to how decision is made. Now, in some other aspects, it's the opposite. So let's say the application of, how you build trust. Principle first, application first, opposite ends. When it comes to communicating, then you have, again, a big difference. So when you know this, then you can know where to focus on your attention and where to be more vigilant. And this can help you in a leadership situation, conflict resolution, or even in your daily life. Now, this one here is from the Culture Map by Erin Meyer. So as you work in a team, if you get new people onboarded, then you can look this up and see where are the places where you might need to do some work to make sure things work well. Now, when something unexpected happens, what I do usually, I do a quick Google, ask some friends, but you can also ask, but make sure you ask respectfully. So don't just say, hey, why do you do this? Because they might feel attacked, but you can do it indirectly. So let's say for time perception, I might ask this person, hey, I'm looking into the different cultures in our team. I want to understand them. And I saw the different aspects. There's how you communicate and time perception. Can you tell me more about your culture? So you see how I approach this, even my body language, it's about curiosity. It's not about anger. And what you have to remember is the goal here is not to be right, because there's no such thing. It's about understanding the other party. Cultures are relative. So each aspect, each area, each culture has their own set of rules, and whatever might be right there locally might be completely off in a different area. So as you develop your cultural intelligence, your mind expands to have all these perceptions and be able to really navigate these complexities. It's about not knowing everything about the culture, but knowing where the differences and similarities lie. So when you need to look something up, you know to do it and avoid poor mistakes. Journaling is one way that you can also help gather this. So something happens, immediately take a journal, write down your thoughts and feelings. And as you get to understand what's going on, amend these notes, and then you can also discuss this with friends. So now, first we get the understanding of ourselves. Now I give you some tools on how to manage interactions. Now the third tip I'm going to give you is how you can grow your cultural intelligence. When it comes to this journey, of cultural intelligence. Now, maybe this is the first time you hear about it, maybe not, but this is something, it's a continuous process. Even me, after all these years, 15, 20 years now, of applying my cultural intelligence and developing it, I still encounter situations that I'm surprised. These cultural blind spots, they are called, or something unexpected. So this is a journey. I give you some tips here, and there's many others. And so just start off, review this, and put yourself in a situation where you are exposed to something new. So as long as you're open-minded and you, let's say, do a travel or some other cultural experience, this can help you just a little bit every time improve your cultural intelligence. And it's about collecting this repertoire of experiences and behaviors, then you can apply the next time something happens. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can start right at home. The easiest, lowest hanging fruit I tell my clients is look around in your workplace. Is there, first of all, when you go to work, who do you say hi to? Is it just the people that are similar to you, same background, same race, perhaps, or also to pretty much everybody? And maybe the person that you're not greeting, or you're not the most comfortable with, or you don't know that you don't know very well, invite them for lunch, socialize. Socializing is the best way to get to know other cultures, because that's when the guards go down, people are themselves and they can share, and the trust and the relation is built, so that later on when you're at work and something happens, then you can ask for things that you cannot ask otherwise. People are more open with you. Even indirect communicators, like let's say India, when you have the relationship, they start to be more direct. You see, so this foundation of like this human connection, it helps in all aspects. Beyond at work, what you can also do is travel. Maybe you just have 2 weeks off, travel somewhere. Go, first of all, solo travel is great, because then you're on your own. Might be a bit scary, but I promise you, you come back, you will feel great. You will be so satisfied from the experience, first that you managed, but also you will more likely get encounters with locals and not just the tourist guides, because you're by yourself. So locals are more comfortable approaching you, and you also will have more opportunities to approach locals and get to know them on a real human level. When you travel somewhere, go outside the beaten path. And even if it's places where they don't speak your language, there's other ways of communicating. Body language, eye contact. I never wear sunglasses when I travel to these places. And through my eyes, I let them know I'm here from a place of respect, curiosity. I'm happy to be here. I want to learn about you. And sometimes we have a conversation just with hand gestures, and then it ends with maybe a nice meal. So travel is good. You can also move abroad for a few years or longer. Your company might have this opportunity to do a transfer. So look into it. Now, the side benefit of doing all this exposure is you build a global network. So instead of having just your network from maybe your university, your country, what if the same strong networks that you already have, think about who they are, you can also have them from a bunch of other regions. Like in my case, I'm Hungarian. I grew up in Algeria. I don't have many contacts from there. I went to school in Canada, but I grew connections here with my African connections. Many West Africans here, also through AIESEC. AIESEC is great. Pretty much every continent. So when I travel, I have connections. When one of my buddies who organizes startup competition, he's Hungarian, he's based in Budapest. But when he was expanding to Southern Africa, he came to me for connections. And I was able to connect him with people in Zimbabwe, South Africa, and other countries and help him be successful. And these networks, you give, it's important to give whenever you can, but opportunities always come back. And also networks are still very important. Even with all this technology that we keep coming back to, 85% of jobs are still filled through the network. When it comes to investors, I don't know if any of you guys are investing, but investors still prefer warm introductions. So it's not somebody you connected with on LinkedIn who you never exchanged with. It's about people they know, people they trust. And this human relationship is developed through communication and spending time together. So I'll give you some tips here. Let's say you go out to another country very far away. You might feel, I don't know what to talk about, how to connect with these people. So I'll give you a few tips for that. So keep in mind, you want to first build rapport, then you build trust. And that's the foundation piece to any kind of relationship. Now, an easy tip that's universal is mirroring. So what you can do is when you meet somebody, try to match their tone of voice, their posture, and this even works through video chat. So position yourself in a way that you feel the screen the same way as the other person. And so what this does is in their subconscious mind, they're going to start thinking, oh, this person is similar to me. Therefore, I trust them and I like them. So as people change, posture adjust, not maybe immediately, don't mimic because that might be offensive, but just kind of follow in a smooth way the way they are communicating. Once you set this up, find a common ground. When I meet somebody new, first, if I can, I do a little bit of Googling, get a little bit of background, see where they studied, what they care about, let's say at conferences. Or when I go to a meeting, I look around the office and I try to see what clues I can gather that can help me understand who this person is, and what are they about. I look around for pictures, maybe of family, of like hobbies, maybe if it's travel pictures, oh my God, we'll be best friends. We can talk for hours. But often, because I know that in many cultural clusters, they are very family oriented. So when I see something about children, I ask about that. And if they do have kids, oh my God, then the pictures come out, graduation, this and that. They're so proud and so happy to share their information about their family because they're passionate. Just like any of us, if you think about it, we have our hobbies or whatnot. And so when this happens, sometimes we get in a 20-minute, 30-minute conversation about family, children, and everything, just after we met. So you can imagine this really sets the stage for a good relationship. So whatever comes next is in their head, oh, I like this person already. So you see, these are little tips you can use. Now let's do a little bit of a recap. First step, understand who you are. So before you get out of the house, understand who you are. This helps you benefit from any situation that comes up. Second is when you encounter people, hold judgment and be curious. Really try to understand what's going on. Now, the frustration that comes, maybe you're right to be frustrated, but first verify. And then finally, seek opportunities where you go out and expose yourself so you can learn by doing, from the experiences. Now, this is a good start. And as you continue to learn, as I said, it's just a journey that began, and it's really rewarding. So I highly recommend that you continue on this journey and learn more. You can, if you make sure that you sign up to the newsletter, we have weekly articles that I post, different aspects. Some are high level, some are more tactical, team management, remote teams. Some are applicable for, expat life, just personal life. Some are really business related. Also, we do live trainings like this one pretty often. Some are deep dives in certain topics, and also announcements go out there. Some cool things we're working on, podcast. So things about cultural experience, cultural intelligence, leadership, all these things that you need to be successful. Also a video series that are going to be the short pieces of video that we're going to post on LinkedIn and Facebook, just a minute or two to give you a weekly tip and also answer questions that we receive. Excuse me. And also an online course where on your own pace, you can learn about what aspects you want to develop and be able to ask questions and also have access to me. If you want to really level up, those who are committed to developing their leadership skills, I also work with companies and individuals. If you have any questions, we can have a conversation. Now let's look at the case studies, how you bring this together, how you apply this in the real world. So the first one was, there was a startup here in Silicon Valley where you had a small engineering team. The main engineer, he was Chinese American. He moved here in about 20 years ago. So he's 41, 20 years ago, middle of his life to study, and then he stayed here. And his boss is Moroccan, who grew up in Morocco, but also studied in the US. And his boss was having issues with some of the work that the engineer did. So the engineer, let's call him Lee, and his boss Bashir. So Bashir came to the room where the 4 engineers are and 2 designers, and he would tell Lee how he felt about his work. So negative feedback directly in front of others. He did this several times, but there was no change. So I'd like to ask you now, what would you do in this case? So again, on the right, type your answer in the text box, and let's see what are the approaches that you guys have in mind. Okay, so do one-on-one, work one-on-one meeting. That's a good one. Have a separate conversation. Yeah, very good. Find out if there's conflict. Yeah, friendly dinner. Yeah, that could work too. So in this case, what happened is, so taking people out in one-on-one, see, this is like in terms of leadership, cross-cultural leadership, negative feedback, always take them out one-on-one. This is a safe way to approach. In some cultures, it might be okay. Like let's say in Hungary, as a Hungarian, if you give me your direct feedback in front of others, it's okay. I don't mind. I'm happy that you tell me directly what I need to change. And I think France is similar, unless you're really blasting the person. So that's a good approach. So when working across cultures, there's some general things that if you adjust, it will be good universally. For example, taboos. There's some things that are taboos in a few cultures. It's a safe bet to make them taboo everywhere because there's no downside, there's only upside. So in this case, one-on-one is great. And then so what happened is, because Lee was very much Chinese in his culture, having direct feedback, doesn't matter how much, in front of others, made him lose face. So in his culture, that's like really not desirable, very painful. So he was not thinking about how to improve or what the message was. He was just so humiliated and embarrassed. So what I did in this case is I took apart both the Bashir and Lee. I was working with them and worked them through their understanding of themselves and the culture and how their actions impact others. So in this case, Bashir understood, oh my God, I didn't mean to insult this person. And then Lee understood that this was not the intent. So then after working with them to understand themselves and just like their general cultural differences and similarities, then I had one session together with them and they were able to, in a way, make up. And then after that, they continued having a very productive relationship. So Lee stayed in the company for another 5 years, and he ended up building out some of the main processes that are still used. So in this case, you see you have conflict that if you don't address it, that person can be bitter, even more bitter, and eventually leave, which will cost you time and money to get somebody else. But the small adjustments in the cultural understanding can resolve the issue. And it's often this. It's just a very small difference that just being aware of it immediately changes the entire situation. Second case study, let's look at, this one was a case of hacking. So this was another startup where hackers, so this startup was a SaaS company, so B2B, providing marketing services to businesses. And so hackers would connect to the account of the clients and use the funds they use to post advertisement to post spam. And because the clients of the SaaS company had the credit card on file to refill the budget, then the hackers could just get more money without needing the credit card. The company lost something, it was like 20 or 30,000 bucks over a few months. Engineers have been trying to solve it for a few months, but the hackers always found a way to get better than basically outmaneuver the solutions that were put in place. So my question again, what would you do differently if you're in this situation? Let's see. Hire external consultant, maybe. But let's look at situation using your own resources. What are ways that you can try to find a better solution? Ask around the office. Yeah, I think you're onto something. So this was Jose. So this is a good tip. So in the same direction, what we end up doing in that company is open the floor to everybody. So engineer problem hacking, engineers trying to solve it. It's like, for the saying goes, for a hammer, every problem is a nail. I think that's how it goes. So the same way, the engineers were trying to solve it from one perspective. Now maybe the engineers were from different cultures, but they were still engineers. So what happened is hire a hacker. Now that might also be a good option. But in the end, we're not finding a easier solution. So what happened is we did a all hands meeting, and then it was actually a former fitness instructor who is now a web designer who came up with an idea that worked. So what she did is, why don't we put a human human element in the equation? So if somebody needs to refill their budget, they need to call in to verify the identity. So this limited the damage, and this immediately shortcutted the hackers. Now, in this particular case, it worked because it's a B2B business. There's a few thousand clients. People refilling happened a few people per day. So they had like maybe a handful of calls every day, more than usual. There was no need to hire additional staff, but it immediately resolved the hacking problem. So you see what happened here is open the floor to everybody, people from diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives, and when you have a problem and you tackle it from different angles, then you have better odds of finding a better solution. So this is what happened, and when they learned this company continued to really make more of an effort to include everybody. Now, including doesn't mean just like, okay, hire somebody, let's say a woman or a person of color. That's not enough. You need an inclusive culture where all these people feel comfortable speaking up. So in this case, Valerie, who was the fitness trainer, I remember she was very hesitant to speak up because she felt, oh, this is engineering problem. I'm not a programmer. But I made sure to create this space where everybody felt comfortable. And the way you do that is you look at the people, get a sense of who they are. And now sometimes you need to ask. Sometimes people volunteer. Sometimes you need to just gently ask. And sometimes you also need to offer other methods of contributing their ideas to be really inclusive, because some people might like to speak up. Some people like to speak to you one-on-one, come to see you at the office, or send you an email. But when you do this is when better innovation happens. Like startups here in Bay Area and Montreal, where I lived before, if you have this inclusivity, not just on not just the checkbox, but create an environment that's fully engaging for everybody, that's when you can become more innovative and succeed. Now let's look at the questions. So type in your question on the right, and I'm going to answer first the question that I received already. So whatever question you have, type it in the chat and I'll get to it. So the first question here was from Matthew. So he's managing folks in the US and where the corporation's home base is. And they also have people in Ireland, US, Asia, and the work ethic and work-life balance outside of the US is different from each area. So how do you set expectations both for yourself and for your global team? So if, let's say, the company is already established, there's already maybe a culture going on, it's great. Now, when people come in, be aware of the differences and be respectful for religious and other cultural differences. So don't just like say, hey, do this is the way or the highway. Try to understand where they're coming from. And so you can explain to them why they need to do it or why the rule is there in a way that they understand it. So meet people in their comfort zone when it comes to explaining. And they explain the why is so important. For example, communication or being on time. Let's say often hear people complain about some Asian countries, they're always late. Now you see the cultural preferences, but it doesn't mean that the people cannot do something else. So there was this one example where there was a bunch of Saudi attendees at a conference who one day were late, but the host made a request. And because they explained the why, next day, everybody was there on time, like everybody, 100%. So you see, if you explain the why, people don't feel like you're trying to maybe patronize them or some other negative reactions. Once they understand, it's much easier for them to adapt. It might not be immediate, but it takes, but it is much faster. Now, from yourself, understanding again this other culture and looking back at the different areas, then you can know as your expectation, okay, these areas, okay, we are similar, so that's okay. This other aspect may be explanation. They are on the other side. So get familiar. What is principle first? What is application first? So when you work, let's say, with an engineer who is on the other side, what you can do is, oh, why don't I start explaining, let's say, a task both ways? Let's say if it's in a team setting. So again, coming back to being inclusive. So you explain in a way that people who are task first or application first, they can both understand. And this comes to other different aspects. Now, one aspect that is tricky is communication. So communication, what you want to do is if people are from different types of communications is if you have other than just direct communicators, then you need to set a standard, which is direct communication. So let's say you have direct and indirect, or two indirect communicators, You have to set the rules, and then the way you do it is explain why this is happening, set the rules, and almost you're setting the culture of communication. And you have to explain why you're doing this. And some things like asking a question or asking to repeat in some, or having an accent in some area, some cultures might be seen as negative. So you have to set the rules like, no, it's okay to ask again. So people who, let's say, have an accent and have trouble understanding somebody else, they don't feel uncomfortable asking. And when it comes to generally, like early on, let's say in your case, I think your company is already well established. In cases where you're starting a new company, then setting the culture as a group activity is a great idea. So the way you do that is come together and co-create this. So everybody has a buy-in and you get much better engagement from that side. So I hope this answers the question, and you can always follow up with me for clarifications. Second one from Mira. One strategy I can deploy in leading a team to a project, the catch, the political and social values are not in line with mine. So here, the end goal is to be successful. It's not to be right or whatnot, as I said earlier. And so what you want to do is understand where they're coming from in terms of motivation. This is what matters. And also how their working style is. So if somebody cares about, let's say, titles or money, then that's different than somebody cares about just spending more time with their family. And so, let me see. So exactly. So build rapport one-on-one. So you understand who are the people you work with and how you can motivate and inspire each of the different people so that together you go in the same direction. So cultural intelligence helps here because you become aware of the nuances, differences, and know what are the adjustments you have to make. So sometimes in the group setting, you can share information in a way that's inclusive. So the different styles of understanding are covered. In the one-on-one, then you can meet them in their comfort zone. And you can also help them, kind of coach them to understand yours. And actually, if you model cultural intelligent behaviors, then that kind of trickles down. So then people start to pick up on it. You can even do, let's say, short training with the team that helps, so that then when they, evolve, the company goes, that also helps. So it comes down to building that rapport, that human connection where it matters. So the trust is there. You can have different political views. It's fine. Just like some people prefer direct communication, indirect communication. It's also fine. So leave that out. But on the human level, have that connection, have that rapport, and then that can be a good foundation for leading. And whenever there's an issue, yeah. And when it comes to, let's say, there might be in the question you mentioned social values. So if they doing something that maybe makes you uncomfortable or makes other people uncomfortable, then bring that up. Now, the way you can do it is you can do like a general all hands meeting where you do a little bit of training about, cultural differences. So let's say personal space. Maybe you have people who come from a culture where they like to be close. And maybe it's a guy, and you might have a woman from another culture. So the guy might make the woman uncomfortable because different gender, but also the personal space. So make a general training. So it's not pointing out anybody in particular. If that doesn't help, then you can do one-on-one conversation, but then don't be accusative. Just like I mentioned earlier, come from a place of a curiosity. I mean, you might know what you want them to do, but come from like, oh, I'd like to learn about you, and then explain them the why, the differences, and then often most people have a positive intent. So it's just about helping them understand. So I hope this is a good start. Again, if you have any questions, just reach out to me. I'm happy to give you some more tips. Another question: when it comes to bridging culture successful, what is your biggest aha moment in your work experience? What situation was that? So cultural differences, because the aha or the most surprising moment was when I dealt with a culture that I thought was similar. Like when I go to, let's say, Thailand or Egypt, people look different already. So it's obvious there's differences. But coming from Canada to, let's say, the US, or people who speak English just like me. So one example with a client who did business in China. When he did that, he was always assigned an interpreter who translated the language and the culture. When he started doing business in India, where people spoke English, he was so happy. Oh, I don't need an interpreter. So easy. I'm doing business. I'm a international business person. I'm so successful or whatnot. He goes to negotiate a deal about manufacturing some garments. He asks the person, will this be ready in 2 weeks? The person says yes. He comes back home. He tells me, great business trip, so productive. But then what happened is in 2 weeks, the garments were not ready. What happened is that the person, when they said yes to a question, they did not mean that yes, it will be ready. They meant yes, I understood you. So you see, the culture behind the language will affect the meaning of the words. Sometimes it's the same word. And in Indian culture, saying no to somebody is like it undermines the relationship. So it's very hard to get an honest no. But if you develop the relationship, then they're more likely to be straightforward with you. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. So one thing I want to leave you with is, so workplace is changing. You have, and the changes are going to increase. Just like in other changes, when it comes to industrial revolution and all these other times, those who adapted were those who succeeded. So here, you have an opportunity to pick up the tools right now that maybe give you a small edge today, but that in 5 years or later are going to be essential. And later on, it's the managers who have these skills who who are going to succeed, get ahead, and become the true leaders in the great positions. Now, this might seem like a lot, and the many things, but the basic takeaway, it would be, it's a matter of mindset. Whenever you go somewhere and there's something new, something unusual, approach it with humility, patience, and an open mind, and with that, you will succeed. So thank you a lot. And as I mentioned, I have a surprise for you. So I put together a self-assessment for CQ, cultural intelligence, and also a cultural cheat sheet. So I put a link here, cqsavvy.com/AIESEC Life bonus. If you go there, sign up, put your name and email, I'm going to send to you these two elements. So this can give you a sense of where you are with your cultural intelligence, what aspects you might want to work on, and also a cheat sheet that you can use by looking at, okay, where you stand, who you're dealing with as a leader or just as a colleague, and what are ways that you need to maybe adjust your communication or whatever other aspect. If you have any questions, my email is here, peter@cqsavvy.com. I hope this served you well, and I hope you have a nice day. Thank you.